Welcome to the Primary PE Lead Podcast, the go-to show for all things primary physical education and swimming. I'm your host, Sam Horton, bringing you practical tips, expert insights and real talk to help you lead PE with confidence, energy and impact. Whether you're on the field, in the pool or planning your next lesson, we've got you covered. Let's dive in.
I would say that the non-negotiables, the foundational pieces that you need to have. First one, of course, like you always talk about, is your learning environment. You have to have high expectations for student behavior. You have to clearly communicate them to students, and you need to hold students accountable if they don't meet those expectations. That's first and foremost. The second thing is going to be having a standards-based we call them content and language objectives. Students have to know what they're supposed to make progress towards throughout the lesson. We shouldn't just be in there playing games and activities with no purpose. So you have to find a way to find the standards-based learning and then connect it to the activities and the games. And then the third thing I would say would be some form of assessment. I don't think every single day you have to have the most intense assessment ever. You don't have to give students exit tickets, little slips of paper with questions on them every day. You might want to do that once a week. But you have to be taking some sort of assessment, not just for grading, right? That's a whole nother topic, but so that you can reflect on your teaching and make modifications for the next class. Because if you're not capturing some sort of data, you're just going to move on to the next lesson and the next lesson and the next lesson without making the modifications that your students need.
Really looking forward to today's episode. My special guest is Gary Zaharatos. He's been within this field for 2 decades. We talk a little bit about his own journey and his current role as a physical education peer observer across all Denver schools. On top of that, we talk a bit about his book, Becoming a Distinguished Physical Education Teacher, and his podcast. So loads and loads of info.
He's an experienced physical education teacher based in Denver, Colorado. 2 decades experience, which is absolutely amazing. He's currently serving as the physical education peer observer and instructional coach within Denver public schools, which I'm really looking forward to getting down to the gritty, knowing your roles and responsibilities with that. Qualifications: Bachelor of Science in Physical Education and a Master's degree in Curriculum and Instruction. Not only that, he's the author of the book Becoming a Distinguished Physical Education Teacher, creating a rigorous, standards-based PE program that is safe and welcome for all students. He also hosts the Distinguished Physical Education podcast, which I was lucky to be on. I think it was episode 13. Variety of topics, which is really beneficial for anybody within this field. How are you, Gary?
I'm doing great, Sam. I was listening to you say all those things and I was like, wow, those things are pretty cool. Oh, wait, that's me. I did those things.
I remember looking on a podcast app a good few months back, and the thing that got me into knowing who you were was episode 12, and it was all to do with assessments, and you had a couple of guests on there. And I was listening to the podcast and I was just completely blown away how much detail is within that podcast. For example, we talk about assessments where it's just a tick sheet and it's just a rag system, red, yellow and green. But the amount of information that was within that podcast, it really blew me away. And that alone made me a better teacher because there was so much things that I could take away from it.
That's really nice to hear, Sam. I'll give most of the credit to 2 of my friends. So Jen Smith was on that episode with me and Jesse Weber as well. And they are just brilliant physical education minds. Especially when it comes to assessment. So yeah, that was a great episode. And then just to speak quickly on, what you said about the level of detail, one thing that always kind of frustrated me a little bit when I was looking for resources for physical education was that sometimes you would find things that you think are really great and you can go implement them, but they were lacking a little bit of that, like on the ground, this is what it looks like to implement them. So I always try to filter in the work that I do and the resources that I provide for teachers, what is exactly what this thing can look like? Because I want teachers to be able to just go implement these things immediately right away.
Brilliant. So I want to go back to the early days of your teaching career and the first few weeks. So my first question for you is a 2-part kind of question, would be the experience of teaching, the experience of the children, and the support that you got from mentors or higher up people within the school itself, did it kind of justify of how your actual experience was within the first few weeks as well? Did it kind of come hand in hand?
Yeah. So first, you're the first person that's ever told me that I had early days, Sam. So you're making me feel old. I didn't know that I had early days, but I guess I did. So yeah, I guess you know. I'm trying to think back of some of my first memories when I was teaching. So I mentioned in the introduction that I had just gotten out of college and I felt like I was super prepared, right? I had all these different lesson plan books that I was referring to every single night when I got home. I would dig into these books and come up with the lesson plan that I was going to do the next day or the day after that. And what I found was I was like woefully unprepared. I feel like there were some elements in my undergrad college program that maybe didn't connect with the real world in ways that most teachers need them to. So what I did was I asked my principal what type of support they had in the building so that I could have somebody come and support me. And she was really great. They did have a program. They called it a mentor program. And it ended up being the art teacher. I think it was the art teacher. Maybe it was the music teacher. But that was great. She was a teacher for 15 years. She knew her content, but she couldn't really help me in physical education. So I didn't really get the type of support that I feel like most young teachers need when they're just starting out this career. I would get feedback from assistant principals. I remember the first one I ever got, a feedback conversation after a lesson was that he told me, and this was a great guy, I loved this assistant principal. He told me that I needed to keep developing my toolbox. And I'm like, dude, you're here to develop my toolbox. That's your job. Like, I don't even know what the toolbox is. I don't know what tools to put in this thing. Uh, so it was a bunch of stories like that where all along the way, I feel like I was trying to continue growing, but it was challenging at that time, especially because we didn't have social media and the wealth of resources that are out there now for teachers.
Looking at my research about yourself, it did seem to me that you were such an eager PE teacher and you were just desperate for someone to help you with that subject knowledge. And obviously, like you're saying, that you had that mentor. It coming across to me that they kind of helped you on how to be a teacher, but they couldn't actually help you teach a lesson. And I find that it's very similar to how we have it around here as well, is that I've been taught how to be a teacher who teaches PE. And a lot of what I had to do with myself was a lot of it was by myself, doing my own research of how to be a better PE teacher. Because I think there's a massive difference from teaching in the classroom than on the field.
Absolutely. And I don't think that, well, I appreciate you bringing up those qualities because I really did want to get better. But I don't think that those are qualities that are all that unique to me. I think a lot of teachers out there, especially younger ones, they really do want to be as good as they possibly can at this discipline, being a physical education teacher. So it's just challenging because the resources that are out there in school buildings are mostly geared towards math and literacy and science, etc. We don't get a lot of personalized or individualized physical education support. So I'm really lucky in the role that I have now, or that I've had for the last, I think it's going on 12 years now, where I get to support physical education teachers throughout the city. And I know that's something that you wanted to talk a little bit about today as well.
Of course, definitely. Now, to get a bigger picture of, because for me personally, I feel like the whole of your journey is one big circle in the way that you had that poor experience and then you found a veteran physical education teacher, Coach Graham, that supported you. And then you found your dream job as the peer observer instructional coach. And it feels like you're giving back, which is, I think, is amazing. That's what it feels like to me. You're through your poor experience, you're not allowing any other PE teacher to have the same experience yourself, which is amazing. So I want to still dive into the early days, maybe the first 2 or 3 observations you ever had. Did you know it was coming? Did they give you a heads up? And what was the feedback you were given? Was it beneficial? And if it wasn't beneficial, do you reckon it's down to the lack of subject knowledge?
Yeah. Thank you for reminding me too about Coach Crane, my good friend. He did a first of all, I mean, I learned so much from him because when you're a PE teacher, especially at the secondary level, which I was a middle school PE teacher, uh, you have other teachers that you can work with. Primary, elementary school, sometimes not so much. Sometimes you're the only one in the building, and that can feel isolating. I was really lucky to have Coach Crane because we got to team teach. I got to learn from him. You know, I got to learn right alongside him for several years. So that was really incredible. He was an incredible resource to have. He was a guest on my podcast, I think like the third episode, something about back to school strategies for secondary teachers. Going back to those first couple observations. So, like I said, the first one where my assistant principal told me to develop my toolbox, I do remember he came and observed me during an ultimate frisbee lesson, and I got the feeling back then that as long as students weren't getting hurt, as long as I wasn't sending anyone to the nurse because students were in a dangerous situation, that I was an effective teacher. And of course, we all know that that's not true, but I think that's what building leaders or administrators look for in PE because they don't know what effective instruction looks like in physical education. So they just kind of step back and say, well, I don't really know what I'm doing here, but nobody's getting hurt. So that must be it. And then they walk away. So that was the first one. The second observation that sticks out in my mind was when I had a different assistant principal come up to me in the cafeteria one day. So I was doing lunch duty with students, and he just very casually said, "Hey, Gary, we got to talk in a couple of days about your last lesson. You know, we have to debrief. I want to give you some feedback." And I said, "Yeah, of course, no problem." And then he left, and I thought to myself, wait, when did he observe me? I don't even remember when he came to my class. And then I thought back like 3 days ago, he was on his golf cart and he rode one lap around the track on his golf cart. So it probably took 2 minutes or something like that. And that was what he was considering an observation. So I never really got that, like, the detailed level of feedback that I strive to give my teachers that I work with here in Denver, Colorado.
Did you reckon that's down to the staff who are leaders within their school? They're not as fussed as other subjects like history, geography, maths, and so on.
I think that they were probably great coaches when it came to the history teacher and the literacy teacher, right? They probably gave them great feedback. But most people, and I'm not trying to like call out my old assistant
No,
principals from 15 years ago, but most people are not comfortable giving feedback to a PE teacher or to an art teacher or to a music teacher. So that's why I'm so grateful that I'm in this role. And not only that, because it's not really about me, it's about the teachers that I work with. In my current role, the only people that I work with are people who choose to opt in to having me as a support. It's very rare that I will get like assigned to a teacher. So I have 50, 60, sometimes 70 teachers and building leaders who ask me to come support them. So that's a reflection on them. Like, these are super reflective teachers who just want to continue to grow and get better for their students. So it really isn't about me. It's about the level of reflection that all of these teachers that I work with have.
Well, we have a similar kind of issue here in the UK where primary PE is what I teach, and that's ages 4 to 11. And some schools really do. They're very passionate about it, and some schools aren't. And it's that hands off approach, like what you're saying, the way that some of them have that fear factor of teaching it as well, because a lot of these teachers within the UK, they get all the qualifications, and they're telling me that they've gone to university, and just a small percentage is to do with primary PE. So the lack of knowledge and the fear factor is there. So
Yeah.
it's understandable, and I wish that primary P was a bit more respected, because there is, like I say, there's some schools that are all for it, and some of them that aren't. And it's something that I want to dive into, is that I want to try and mentor and support schools around my area, because I think they could really benefit my help. but it's
Absolutely.
sometimes the door is wide open, and sometimes it's completely shut.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's funny. I think it's actually reversed here in the States, where I feel like elementary school PE gets more of the attention here as far as like resources and curriculum goes. And then secondary PE is kind of almost left on their own to kind of figure out their own curriculum and as far as support and those types of things goes. That's interesting.
So I want to dive into your fourth year middle school. It all changes when they hired a veteran physical education teacher, Coach Graham, and you've already told me a little bit about him in a way that you did a bit of team teaching, did a planning together and stuff like that. Could you go in a bit more detail of your experience with Coach Graham, and how did it benefit you and be a even better PE teacher?
Well, one of the things was that he came from an elementary school within the district. So we were at a middle school that's students who are, let's say, 13, 14, and 15 years old, give or take. Yeah. And he came from a primary school in the district. So when he first got there and I saw him start teaching, I saw him very explicitly and very intentionally communicate expectations to students, communicate learning objectives. And to me, it was a little too like granular, too much detail. I would think to myself, these are 14-year-old students, right? These are 15-year-olds. They don't need you to tell them how to walk out of the locker room and stand on their spots. You can just tell them, I'll see you in the locker room, and they'll go do it. But what he taught me was you could take so many of the effective practices from elementary school, from primary school, and bring that up to middle or up to high school, any secondary level. And that's the primary thing that made me a better teacher, was watching him, how explicitly he communicated what he wanted his students to do. So that was the first and foremost thing.
That's the thing that's I've learned over the years. It's the expectations, it's the ground rules, it's the structure. Children work well with structure. It doesn't matter what age you're at. Adults work well with structure, and it's about being prepared, that getting those expectations across and being one step ahead. So if I say to the children, come into the gym hall and meet me over here, they might run to the gym hall. And I was like, well, I didn't tell them to walk to the gym hall. If you meet me on the spot, they will meet on the spot. It's all about being one step ahead. And it's took me a while to learn that as well. And I think that it's all about that environment. Once you get the expectations across, they clearly understand your expectations, they will respect you. Because I'm not there to be pally-pally. I'm there for them to show respect, and that fun aspect of us getting along, building that relationship will blossom because the respect is there. So I clearly understand what Coach Graham was doing there. So before you saw Coach Graham then, what was your expectations like before that then?
Yeah, I think what I would do was I felt like I could treat my students more like young adults, and I would say things to them. So if we just continue to use the like the locker room to the gym transition, I would say, you have 30 seconds to go from the locker room to your spots in the gym, right? I'll see you in there in 30 seconds. And then if they did that, great. And most of the time they did. But if they didn't, I did do resets, so I would bring them back into the locker room. But what I was missing was that level of clarity that Coach Crane taught me about, and just like how you described. So what he taught me was to say something like, when I say go, you'll have 30 seconds to go from the locker room to your home base rows. I expect to see you walking to your spots. When you get there, you have to be at a voice level 0, and I want you to have your eyes on me when I come in the gym, or something like that. Yeah, so I mean, that level of clarity is what almost any student needs, regardless of the age level. And then, of course, you can dial it back from that as the weeks and months go on in the school year. Eventually, I still believe that you do want to get to a place where you can say, what the routine is. I'll see you in the gym in 30 seconds. You do want to get there, but you have to hold students accountable and be explicit about what you want them to do until you get to that point.
Yeah, of course. It's like I say, they work well with structure. There's class that I teach now, they're 7-8 year old, and for weeks and weeks and weeks, I want them to get engaged nice and quickly within the first 10 seconds. So I want you to run in and out with friends, looking for space, showing agility skills, different speeds, etc. Now I go, and they do it. I can actually instruct them non-verbally because I've been doing it week in, week out, which is so cool. And I've just shown the start position and stuff like that, and the high five position without communication. Communicating in a non-verbal way. And you can have, and then you can have that fun with the children because my relationship is building. But yeah, it's very, very good with all that information. So let's move on to the day that you saw the advertisement as a education peer observer instructional coach for Denver schools.
Yeah, I remember that. I moved from I was in Arizona when I taught, a couple states south of here, and I moved up to Colorado because my brother was going to college here. He was getting a PhD in applied mathematics. I mean, my brother is a smart guy. He's the smart one of the two brothers. So I moved up here because I don't know if your listeners will know, but Arizona is hot. It's the desert, so it can be 110 degrees there. It's dry, but it's very, very hot. And most of my PE teaching was outside, actually, which is really crazy when I go back and think about it. So I was looking for a change. I moved up to Colorado to be a little bit closer to my brother, which was great. We still live close to each other and see each other often. And I came across this job posting for what they call here in Denver a peer observer, but you're right. What the better term for people to understand is an instructional coach, but it was geared specifically towards physical education. We have an art person, we have a music peer observer, we have someone for ECE, early childhood, so 3 and 4-year-old students. Someone who observes and coaches teachers in world languages, Spanish, French, Italian, all those things. And it looked like just the perfect job. I mean, like you said earlier, it matched the experience that I was having. I know it sounds like a little selfish kind of, but I said to myself when I read that job posting, this is the person that I needed. So I carried that with me. Luckily, I got the job, of course, but I carried that with me, and I continually remind myself that you're in the role of the person that you needed years ago, in my early days, as Sam would say.
Yeah.
So I try to remind myself that, right? My job is to support teachers so that they grow in their profession. I also want to retain them in Denver public schools. I don't want them to leave and go to a different district. I don't want them to leave the profession entirely, right? We want to retain our teachers and grow them. And then, of course, it's all in service of students, right? You and I truly believe that all students should have access to a high quality PE program. So those are really the three things that drive my work.
It was just like it was meant to be, wasn't it? Just literally meant to be. So what is a day-to-day life within your job role? What does it entail?
Yeah, so you're going to laugh at this actually, because when you and I finish recording today, I go to my first school early in the morning over here, and it's actually a high school chemistry teacher. So it's not physical education this morning, because my role has become a little bit more generalized. So when a teacher opts in, and just anybody needs support, I'm always happy to go help them. And at first I was a little nervous about that when it first started 5, 6, 7 years ago. What am I doing in a high school chemistry class? I have no idea what I'm talking about. But I realized that good instruction is good instruction, right? No matter where you are. I still much prefer, and I'm glad that I get to spend a lot of time with my PE teachers. But I'm also grateful that I get to support other teachers, whether it's high school chemistry or kindergarten literacy, or any of those things. So an average day for me looks like I travel to 3 or 4 schools in the city, and I do one of 3 things usually. One is meet with a teacher before an observation, so we kind of plan out a lesson together. We talk about the indicators that we're going to look for. We have 12 things that we look for in lessons. Luckily, we don't look for all 12 of them at the same time. We only look for 4 at a time. So we talk about those 4 things. The second thing that I would do would be, of course, observing teachers. Most of the time it's informal, right? So it's just coaching. There's no evaluation that's happening with it. Although sometimes there is evaluation. Teachers get evaluated 3 times a year here in Denver, Colorado. And sometimes I do that for them. And then the third event would be the feedback conversation. So 2, 3, 4 days after the observation, I get back together with the teacher and we reflect on the lesson. We reflect on those look-fors, those 4 indicators that we were looking for. What went well, of course, is important to talk about. The teacher's strengths. Every teacher has things that they're doing well. And I've always felt that a really good instructional coach can make a connection between the skills that a teacher has that allow them to do something well in their gym or in their classroom and the next step that they want to work on, right? It's not just you do this really well and here's this other thing that you should go practice. It's what's the connection between those 2 things that really makes teachers, I think, implement those next steps even more consistently and even more effectively.
Amazing. So, through your own journey and then obviously with the current role that you've got now, do you reckon, obviously, because you had those poor observations in the early stages of your career, do you think that's why that you put so much effort in to make sure that the observations are a high quality standard, especially when you're giving that constructive criticism, they're having a step-by-step system of how to succeed?
I think that's certainly one reason. The other reason is kind of like I mentioned earlier, that we want to keep teachers and I want teachers to continue to grow. So that would be the second reason. I think the third reason that I didn't really mention is that I want to make sure that our system, like our growth and evaluation system, and there's lots of components to it, I want to make sure that it's carried out with integrity and fidelity, right? It's a pretty good system, but sometimes we'll see people who don't quite follow the rules with it. And as a result, it harms teachers. So for an example, sometimes a teacher will say to me, I really don't like this system, right? I don't like how I get evaluated. And I'll say, okay, tell me what you don't like about it. Is it that you don't like that you have to have high expectations for your student behaviors? And they say, no, that's not it. Of course I need high expectations for student behavior. Oh, is it that you don't think you should have to use the standards when you plan an objective in your lesson? They're like, no, of course. I always want to use the standard. Is it that you don't think you should have to assess your students? No, I know that I have to assess my students. So I'm like, well, what is it? What is it that's bothering you about this system? And then they'll say something, 9 out of 10 times, they'll say something like, well, my principal did an evaluation on me the day before Christmas break. I'm like, well, that has nothing to do with the system itself. That's your principal should not come in and observe you and score you the day before Christmas break, right? So I guess that's a long way of saying that, like, another thing that motivates me is treating teachers right within this system, making sure that teachers realize it's a growth system. And the term that we try to use is that a teacher should never feel like it was a got you moment, right? They should never feel surprised. They should never feel like they were snuck up on and evaluated out of nowhere and they weren't prepared. So the thing that drives me is making sure that teachers feel prepared and that it's always like an open book test. Everybody knows the answers. We're collaborating with each other, and teachers have plenty of things that they can go experiment with implementing in their classroom. And when it comes down to their evaluation, they already know what the coach is looking for. There's no surprises. So that also motivates me.
I bet it's rewarding in a different way, because when you was a PE teacher, it's rewarding when your students were excelling. Now it's rewarding when the teachers are excelling. So it's a similar kind of buzz.
Absolutely. And I'll call Jen, who we talked about earlier, after an observation like that, and I'll say, oh my goodness, I gotta tell you what this teacher just did, because we've been working on this for 2 months and I just saw her do it, right? So yeah, you're totally right. I mean, I love it. And it also trickles down to the students too, because I can see how much more engaged the students are in the lesson and how much more students are learning as a result of teachers implementing these practices. So one way I try to think about it is, I used to have 300 students that I taught. Now I have 50 or 60 teachers that I support, and they each have 300 or 400 students, right? So again, I try not to make it about myself, but if I step back and just look at like the zoom out view, I think that the things that I work with teachers on do have an impact on, maybe tens of thousands of students across the city in their physical education classes.
Now, before I dive into about your book and your podcast, I wanted to have a little chat to you about how important is swimming, because obviously I teach swimming ages 4 to 11. Is it something that's a big focus over there or not?
Yeah. In some places. So I'm trying to think of the schools that have swimming pools and that actually use them. We have at least 2 high schools that I can think of off the top of my head, and a couple of middle schools. So again, middle school is like ages 13 to 15. And what in high school, teachers will, I think there will be one designated swimming teacher, but again, that's only at 1 or 2 of our schools. Not all of our high schools have that. Uh, in middle school, it's more of just like a unit that students would do. So they do an invasion games unit and et cetera, and then a swimming unit for 2 or 3 weeks. But I don't think it's as well ingrained in the practice as what you told me when the last time you and I chatted.
Well, we're very lucky that the students within my school, that the pool is on site. That's why they're very lucky to have it. So ages 7, 8, stroke 9, they have it every single week for the whole entire academic year. So they're very, very lucky. Where some schools don't have that opportunity. And the problem we have around here is, it's with everywhere, it's costs, transport costs, gas and electric, at leisure centres. So it is still a bit of a roller coaster ride. It's not a smooth ride for swimming within the UK. So let's talk about your book, okay? So you are the author of the book, Becoming a Distinguished Physical Education Teacher, creating a rigorous standards-based PE program that is safe and welcoming for all students. So am I right that this was published May 2024?
Yeah, we're coming up on 1 year anniversary, which is hard to believe.
So could you tell me a little bit about what entails in the book and the reasons behind why you wanted to do this to begin with?
Sure. So I want to start by saying that I don't write this book if I'm not in this role that I have now, right? The things that you read in that book come from the hundreds and hundreds of PE teachers that I've worked with over the last 12 years. So it took me about 7 years, I think, 6 or 7 years to actually write that book and put it together exactly the way that I wanted to. There were some stretches in there where I never even opened the document, right? So I probably went 6 months here and 4 months there and 8 months here without even looking at it. Like, it just wasn't a project I was currently had the time for. But I'm really proud of it because, and you and I talked about it a couple days ago, actually, because of the level of detail that I really wanted to make sure was in that book. So one thing that you'll see in there is, if we're talking about, we already talked about communicating behavior expectations. So I'll go to a different example. If we're talking about how you write a lesson objective that's based on a standard, I don't want to talk about it at like a 30,000-foot level. I want to give teachers, if they want it, and they can modify it any way that they like, but I want to give teachers language that they can actually use with their students so that they can get comfortable practicing and implementing these instructional methods. So in the book, you'll notice that every once in a while, there's a little section that will be like, this is what the teacher says, and you can read it and say, oh, you know what? I could say that. Or you might say, that doesn't really sound like me, but I get it, and I can modify the language a little bit in order to get the same point across. So the level of detail was really something that I was hoping would come through in the book, and the feedback that I get from it from everybody has really been overwhelmingly positive.
I mean, it just tells you that you're a kind of person that's constantly focuses on best practice, and it shows within the book. And some little things like this: inclusivity, engagement. These are some of your chapters. High expectations, use of space, standards-based contents. I call it learning objective and vocabulary around here, and language objectives, assessing, feedback. It seems to me that you're, like I said to you at the start of our podcast, it's that kind of that circle. You've had that poor experience, found Coach Graham, then you are doing a phenomenal job as a P observer and instructional coach, and you're giving back to people because you constantly want these P teachers to stay within our field. And the information that's in your book is just from being good to outstanding. I'm very, very impressed.
Well, thanks, Sam. I appreciate that. You make it sound so easy.
It really isn't. Well, I'm a content creator, and I've been doing my own scheme work for the last 2 years. For somebody who's been doing their book for 7 years, I completely understand why it's took that long. Because even with my scheme work, I put it to the side and disappear for a few weeks. I'm like, I don't want to look at another lesson plan. It's driving me around the bend. So that's the best thing I've ever done, is create my own systems, and definitely the worst thing I've ever done because I've had no life for the last 2 years.
Yep, I understand.
So let's dive in a bit more into the book itself. So some of the chapters that you think that are really going to be beneficial. I know that you've got little things like, you've got a chapter where it's how to actually have an interview, getting you ready for an interview. Is it P interview and stuff like that? So it really is the encyclopedia of from day one to actually getting the dream job. So what kind of things do you think that really pops out for someone who's desperately wants to succeed within this field?
There was a teacher that I met with who we were meeting for a feedback conversation, and she told me at the end of the conversation that her position had been let go and that she needed to start applying for other jobs for next year. And she asked me if I could help her prepare for an interview. So we had a quick conversation, 15 or 20 minutes, and I listed out like 4 or 5 things that I thought were really important. Like, you have to convey these things and communicate these things in a job interview. And then as I was driving home, I said, oh, shoot, I got to get home and write those things down. Right. So that's what happened with a lot of chapters in the book, is that I had conversations with teachers, or I saw a teacher do something in the gym, and then I would drive home as quick as I could and write down some of those ideas and then flesh them out later. So there's that chapter on the job interview. Another one that I'm really proud of is the chapter on standards-based social skills. I know that that's something that you're passionate about also. I feel like the majority of PE lessons, in my opinion, should focus on the social skills that we here in the States have in our national and our state standards. So that's another thing that I was really passionate about and excited to write about.
You know, the social and the emotional aspect. I thought it was like potentially was a COVID thing, why the children attention span isn't as high as it used to be. But I do think it's the generation that we've got now, in a way that when I first started out, because I've been within my own school setting for 8 years, when I first started out as a sports coach, I think the activity levels were very, very high during, like lunch times and stuff like that. But I think that it is quite challenging now. The attention span isn't as high as it used to be, in a way that I have to keep changing it up all the time, keep changing the activities. You could do a skill drill that was lasting 15, 20 minutes 7, 8 years ago, but now it's 5, 10 minutes before you move on to something else. Is that quite similar what's happening in the States as well?
Oh, absolutely. And, I say this often. I hope that my job stays around for a long time, because I really do love it and I want to continue supporting the people that I work with. But if one day it does go away and I find myself back in a teaching position in the gym, it will be at the primary level. And the reason is because when a 7-year-old kid shows up at the gym, a 7-year-old student, they look at you like you're famous, like you're a rock star. So the attention span, I think, is a little bit longer at that primary level, whereas when you move up to secondary, I feel like it's a real struggle. The thing that teachers struggle with the most here is students who are on their phones during class. We have some schools, I think, that started taking phones at the beginning of the day, but it's not a district-wide policy. And I might actually be thinking about other states. I don't know if there's actually any schools here in Denver that have banned cell phones yet. But what I hear from most secondary teachers is the struggle that they have with keeping students' attention. Whereas in elementary school, yes, it's still a challenge, but I think students are a little bit more willing to give you the benefit of the doubt because they so badly want to be in PE class in elementary school, almost every student. So as a PE teacher, you can harness that energy and then go do quick minute of instruction, 5 minutes of activity, 1 minute of this, and you structure your class in a way that harnesses that activity, as opposed to the secondary level where you're constantly having to motivate students over and over and over throughout the lesson.
So I think the great thing about your book, it's very universal. It's for anybody within our field. What I mean by that is somebody who's very early into the career or somebody who's very experienced, because the information is such high quality. So for somebody who was interested in getting your book, where could they purchase it from?
Yeah, you could find it on Amazon, Becoming a Distinguished Physical Education Teacher. I believe I also link it in the description to most of my podcast episodes, so you can find that link in there, but you could always just search on Amazon.
If you could get elements, little bits from your book and turn it into a high quality P lesson, what would you be looking for yourself who's delivering it, and then put it into your own shoes, somebody who's observing it?
Oh, that's a great question, Sam. That's something we could talk about for a long, long time. So there's 2 chapters in the book. I think chapter 9 and 10, maybe, which takes all the things that I talked about in all the previous chapters and incorporates them into a primary lesson example and then a secondary lesson example. So you might read the first 8 chapters and say, wow, this is a lot of stuff, right? What does it even look like to have all of these things implemented in a lesson? And then you get to chapter 9 and you read through an elementary or primary PE lesson, and you can see how all of the things are detailed in there. I would say that the non-negotiables, the foundational pieces that you need to have. First one, of course, like you always talk about, is your learning environment. You have to have high expectations for student behavior. You have to clearly communicate them to students, and you need to hold students accountable if they don't meet those expectations. That's first and foremost. The second thing is going to be having a standards-based we call them content and language objectives. Students have to know what they're supposed to make progress towards throughout the lesson. We shouldn't just be in there playing games and activities with no purpose. So you have to find a way to find the standards-based learning and then connect it to the activities and the games. And then the third thing I would say would be some form of assessment. I don't think every single day you have to have the most intense assessment ever. You don't have to give students exit tickets, little slips of paper with questions on them every day. You might want to do that once a week. But you have to be taking some sort of assessment, not just for grading, right? That's a whole nother topic, but so that you can reflect on your teaching and make modifications for the next class. Because if you're not capturing some sort of data, you're just going to move on to the next lesson and the next lesson and the next lesson without making the modifications that your students need. So I would say those are the 3 main components that every teacher should focus on in every lesson. And then, of course, there's, a dozen other things that we could start to layer on top of those.
It's like music to my ears, because that's everything that I strongly believe in, literally. And it's something that I will constantly self-reflect to be better at. Because those 3 things, and talk about the layers that you haven't thrown on yet, but those 3 things I personally believe those are the 3 most important things. If you have those 3 things in, you're going to have a quality lesson. So it's something that I strongly believe in. Before we finish off, I just want to talk about you again. You're a busy person. You've got your own podcast, Distinguished Physical Education Podcast. What entails within that?
Yeah. Again, it was just an idea that I had one day. I was listening to some other PE podcasts, and I was like, these are really good. And I think that I can take a slightly different approach to it and just fill in some gaps here and there. So the podcast has been really fun. And it's been awesome to be able to talk to people from not just all across the country, but of course, as you know, Sam, I get to say all around the world because I got to talk to you, which is a really cool thing to be able to say. So I think it's great because I get to facilitate other people's expertise, right? I either reach out to people or they reach out to me, and I get to pull all of their experience and their expertise out and have it be shared with hundreds of other teachers. So it fits in with all of the other work that I do. And again, I'm just so lucky and grateful that all of these smart people want to talk to me, including yourself, of course. Can I add one more thing, Sam, if you don't mind?
Go for it. Yes, please.
So another thing that I've been working on, and I don't know how it would work with UK listeners, but I'd like to at least throw it out there as an option, is my friend Jen and I are facilitating a book study this August. It's going to start in August. It's 10 sessions long, so it's going to be one session a month throughout the entire school year from August 25 to May of 26. And each session, they're about an hour. Some of them are 90 minutes long. And they focus on one chapter of the book. So we dig a little bit deeper into some of those concepts. We're going to have 25 or 30 physical education teachers in our virtual meeting sharing all of their expertise, and it's all job embedded. So when we talk about something like communicating high expectations, it's not just going to be me talking about it. It's going to be 15 or 20 or 25 other physical education teachers talking about how they do it. So sharing that expertise in the room. And then, like I said, over the course of 10 sessions and approximately 20 hours of learning, I think teachers are really going to benefit from the things that they hear and how they can go implement them into their practice. So if anyone's interested in that, they can just look on one of my recent podcast episodes, Distinguished Physical Education, and there's a couple of links in there to the book study. The reason I said it might be questionable for my overseas friends is just the timing of it, but who knows, maybe we could make something work out, because I think it would be really cool to have some teachers from across the pond in the book study.
Oh, brilliant. And I'll share it on my stories as well for you, and I'll put it on my socials.
Awesome, yeah.
But
Love it.
Gary, thank you so much for everything. I've really, really enjoyed the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Thanks for having me on, and let's do it again sometime.
Thank you very much for watching or listening to my podcast. I really appreciate it. If you would like to be a guest on any future episodes, you can get in contact with me through my socials. Speak to you soon. Bye for now.